Oh, you got to be more transparent. It's all about transparency now, about your health, about your taxes, about all of that.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Transparency is kind of your own thing. You'll be transparent about what you think you can be transparent about, which means there's really no transparency. Anyway, Professor Joe Cammarano is here from Providence College. Once again, a friend of the program to kind of give some perspective. We've a couple of visits passed since we were holding him down to his projections on the chances for Donald Trump not winning this presidency. But I am looking forward to seeing what Joe has to say about where he thinks this thing sits right now and how Hillary, my thought, how Hillary could be teetering on disaster here if she doesn't get her act together. I'm not talking about how she feels. I'm talking just about how getting her act together. All right, let's get to some things tonight on this Tuesday evening. Regarding the local stuff. Actually, there's only one major story that I wanted to comment on because we've been following this and spending so much time on this over the course of the last year or so. There's a tentative agreement, most likely to be ratified by both the Providence City Council and the union for the firefighters. Headlines on this tentative accord on fire staffing, and then a second there. Here's the story, and then I'll tell you what I think about it.
Gives me great pleasure to announce that hell has frozen over.
After a bitter 13-month battle between Mayor Jorge Alorza's office and the fire union, a new agreement has been made.
What I realized is that the 4-platoon schedule was very important to the fire department, and we were able to reach a resolution within a 4-platoon system.
Last year, in a move attempting to save the city money on overtime, the mayor changed the platoon structure from 4 to 3. The new agreement has the platoon system back to 4 and lowers the minimum manning number from 94 to 88.
Is this a win for your members?
No, I would not characterize it as a win, but it was a choice between prolonged litigation and a return to 4 shifts.
In exchange for these changes, the union has agreed to renew their existing contract with the city.
No one walks away with everything they wanted, but I think that that's a sign of a good agreement.
Parts of this battle have been public with fiery protests and tweets from Union President Paul Dowdy.
Any regrets from some of the things you said online about this?
No, I think at the time those were appropriate, and I think this isn't a business for some people that have thin skin, so politics is a blood sport in Rhode Island and particularly in Providence, and when we're fighting for our members, we're going to fight as hard as we can.
All right, so some of the basics on this whole thing, the 4-platoon shift return November 1st allows the firefighters to have 4 days off between their schedule, which is 10 hours on daytime, 10 hours on daytime, then 14 hours and 14 hours overnight with 4 days off. This moved to 3 platoons, gave them just 2 days off, and jacked their work week from 42 hours to 56 hours, and the whole thing was about trying to save on overtime. And it was a whole complete mess. And for the mayor to say, well, he suddenly realized, or finally realized, that the 4 shifts, meant, or the 4 platoons meant a lot to the firefighters. Like, under what rock was he hiding? This was a completely unnecessary, almost sniper attack politically on the firefighter union, and it was just an outrageously ill-thought-out strategy, and he was going to get his head handed to him in the state Supreme Court, no doubt about it. Still unresolved in this whole thing. By the way, there are raises, step raises, 2 to 3.25% over 5 years for the firefighters. What's unresolved is how they're going to be paid for the last year. They're going to go to arbitration on that, and I would think that the city's probably going to take it in the shorts on that one too, because Alorza offered them 8% of a raise when he increased their work time by 20-some-odd%. Just, the whole thing is a mess. Now, the minimum manning concession that he gets will save on some of the overtime costs, but he thought he was saving money with this thing, found out that he was upside down on it, and frankly, at the end, he's probably not going to save near the money that he thinks he's going to. This is a very difficult place to save money. The place you save money is in benefits, and that has been a concession the firefighters have already offered under the previous administration. A lot of wheel spinning for not a lot for the taxpayers. Look at that. All right, let's go to the politics of the day. Yes, transparency season because everybody wants to be, right? Headlines. New debate emerges over transparency in the presidential race, according to the Wall Street Journal. I'm not sure there's a real debate about it, certainly not between the candidates. Well, I mean, we'll have Joe kind of clear that up for us. This is a concern. Actually, the headline may be more alarming than the actual story written underneath it in the Washington Post. But I guess any doctor can say that a pneumonia will linger for some period of time. It is mid-September almost, and I would imagine that it may take a couple of weeks for anybody to recover from a good bout of pneumonia. Hillary, I think, is going to hit the road by the end of the week anyway, one way or the other. Here's the latest on the race.
Hillary Clinton's campaign admits it could have released more information about her pneumonia more quickly.
I just didn't think it was going to be that big a deal.
The Democratic presidential nominee was diagnosed on Friday, but didn't tell the public until after video surfaced of her stumbling into a van on Sunday. Former President Bill Clinton tells Charlie Rose this has happened to his wife on more than one occasion.
The same sort of things happened to her when she just got severely dehydrated.
At a campaign stop for Clinton in Charlotte, Vice President Joe Biden had blunt words for her campaign.
The staff acknowledged they screwed up. The staff acknowledged they should have on Friday just straight up said she's been diagnosed with pneumonia and should have listened to the doctor, for God's sake.
The Clinton campaign says it will release more of her medical information in the coming days. Clinton's rival, Donald Trump, also plans to release more medical information on Thursday. Trump is giving Clinton a pass on her health. Instead, he hammered her for calling half of his supporters a basket of deplorables.
You cannot run for president if you have such contempt in your heart for the American voter.
The Republican presidential nominee will appear with his daughter Ivanka tonight to lay out his proposals to make child care more affordable for working families.
Quite the week, huh?
Interesting always.
Yeah, I am. This debate over transparency, well, transparency about one thing for one and one thing for the other, right? Now, Donald Trump is, I guess by the time you've seen this show on Tuesday evening, you may have actually seen, is it coming out tonight or tomorrow? I think it might be coming out tomorrow. The doctor's report, the real doctor's report for Donald Trump, and of course she's also going to update her doctor's report. What's the history on how much health information we have traditionally received from the candidates?
Well, recently there's been a little more than what we've gotten from both these candidates. Hillary Clinton, this is a self-inflicted wound, not just the walking pneumonia, which is evidently what it is, which, you know, you can recover from more quickly than the viral pneumonia I had. But in 2008, for example...
How long were you out?
That was viral pneumonia, which is not the kind she has.
Right.
And I was out of school for 6 weeks, but I was wrestling and I was puking for a month while running the hallways during that. So talk about 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah. Sorry, I used that term. but anyway.
That was very Biden-esque of you, by the way. I like that.
In 2008, Barack Obama's doctor issued a fairly brief, but 2 pages, saying, this guy is the most healthy human being I've ever seen. Here are his vitals. John McCain had 1,200 pages that he gave to reporters for a few hours per view. I kind of like that model. I would prefer if we had sort of this
1,200 pages?
Yeah, he had 1,200 pages, which was not as complete.
Do you have a 1,200-page dossier on your health? I know I don't.
No, but I probably have 30 or 40.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was in the hospital overnight once.
No, but yeah, it's.
But you know,
anyway.
I do think that Hillary Clinton needs to stop being so paranoid about transparency. She's always worried that information is going to come back to haunt her. Well, guess what? It does anyway. And you know, Donald Trump. The question is, you know, is this doctor any more reliable than the last one? You know, this is somebody who says one thing and never follows up in a way that is accurate to what he says he would do.
That they didn't tell everybody that she had pneumonia is interesting. I had a doctor on yesterday on the radio on WPRO, and we talked about, you know, I might go to the doctor and find I got a little walking pneumonia, not saying anything to anybody, just try to plug through it. I mean, I'm not running for the presidency. Right. I can promise you I've been here and been afflicted. In fact, I'm dealing with something right now, not contagious. You may be as well. Most Americans deal with things, and I'm trying to figure out whether she gets a pass on just saying, I thought I'd be okay, or whether she's got to cough that up. Coughing it up, all pun intended, probably worried her feeding into the stamina thing that he's been laying against her, and she didn't want to satisfy that.
Absolutely, and who knows how long she's had the allergies, which then aggravate the lungs, which then, you probably know more after talking to the doctor, is what led to what we call pneumonia now. But the reality is that she basically fell into this trap. Now, most people are able to function, but you're running for president, unless you run it the way Donald Trump does, where you fly back home every night. That's probably more grueling than what most people do, except maybe first-year medical residents. I mean, it's a very, very, very grueling thing to do.
Yeah.
And she wanted to power through the September 11th thing, and it was a dumb mistake.
Yeah. When we come back, we'll talk about what I think is maybe a bigger mistake, and that is this notion that half of Donald Trump's supporters are deplorable in a basket. In the meantime, I just want to tell you, if you got some things hanging around in a basket that you think are worth something, you should check out Bruno and Company Auctioneers. They are phenomenal. We had them on the radio program actually last week, and I learned more about this business. You'll learn more about the things that you have in your home that may be of exceptional worth by contacting them and asking them. You'll never know what the stuff in your house is worth unless they take a look at it. They've got a big auction coming up on Saturday this week featuring over 350 lots of large collection of antique miniature portraits and silhouettes from our Cape Cod estate. I'm cheating with my notes because I want you to know how cool this stuff is. But you can actually give them some things on consignment if you think that they're worth something. You may be surprised about the net worth of the things that are hanging around your home. Anyway, big auction coming up this Saturday. Check it out at the website at foxprovidence.com and at Bruno and Auctioneers website. Be right back.
You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
You know, as soon as I saw that, I went, oh no. Right?
Yeah.
You know, love the sinner, hate the sin. Come on. I mean, it's basic stuff.
Yeah, I think, again, sometimes when you keep talking to the same people at fundraisers over and over, you kind of forget that there are cameras there or that there might be phones there. And, yeah, she was probably talking more about the elite who were supporting him, but it comes across dumb. It's a mistake. She apologized.
Well, what do you mean the elite? I mean, I think she's thinking the alt-right. I think she's thinking about people that, I mean,
she's thinking about the leaders of alt-right. She's thinking about David Duke. She's thinking about sort of the white supremacists who have come out. But that doesn't account for, it's a gaffe. It's a dumb gaffe. They usually don't have much of an impact. But again, you know, unforced errors are not good.
Well, no, Mike Pence certainly is trying to shove it down their throat as well as the Donald.
I've never heard a major party candidate in the United States speak about the American people with such contempt. I mean, I'm out on the campaign trail every day. I'm campaigning with Donald Trump and for Donald Trump. And what Hillary Clinton apparently doesn't know is that the people that are supporting this campaign are hardworking Americans.
He's simultaneously right and wrong. It's
yeah.
not the most ludicrous thing. He's obviously not listening to his boss. But on the other hand,
Exactly.
people who may have strong views that Clinton may be talking about are generally decent people.
Sure.
They just, you know, don't call the American people deplorables. It's stupid, just like the 47% was.
Pence is in an interesting place. I mean, I have to say, his level of sincerity, I can't tell. I haven't followed his career long enough to be able to understand, you know, how much of this thing is just laying it on. But I have to give him credit. He was on with George Stephanopoulos a couple of weekends ago, and no matter how many times he was asked about Trump issues, including but not limited to some of the tax issues, he's able to just. He's able to ride this thing. He's not putting himself and his own legacy in danger. His taxes have been left, exposed. What's the word I'm looking for? A little brain spasm there. I mean, he's made them public. He seems to understand the art of arguing for his boss but not covering for his boss. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think, remember, he was a radio talk show host prior to getting into politics, and so he has the ability to sort of stay on message. But I think the other thing he has is a guy with a great deal of integrity. And whether you like his issues or not, this is not a guy who's going to stand up and mince words about his own behavior. I mean, releasing his taxes, he's doing what he thinks is the right thing to do. He's not going to say, my boss should do it. He's just going to say, I'm doing it. So yeah, this is a guy who you can trust, even if you don't agree with.
You could, yeah. But here's where I jump off. I don't know what kind of soul selling he's done or what kind of deal he's made with his own soul to be partnering up with Donald Trump. Now, obviously, my bias comes through. I wouldn't vote for Donald Trump. I've been clear with the viewers and the radio listeners about that. I hold my nose every time, almost every time he speaks. Right. I mean, he's at the House today talking about how, how this is going to be okay for the congressional and the House and Senate races, and he's trying to nurse his old family of elected Republicans in Washington back to some kind of mental health here. Right. So he's a perfect choice for Donald Trump, but I don't know. I just keep thinking, what does he say to himself in the mirror every night?
Yeah, well, again, I think he probably had to make a value choice. He was vulnerable as a re-election for governor, so he probably didn't want to do that. This was a good opportunity. And I do think money is shifting toward the campaigns of Republicans in the House and Senate. Can they save it? Well, we'll see. I mean, if it's a wave election, doesn't matter how much money.
Explain that to everybody. The money is shifting to the Senate and House races because the big money donors just don't have confidence that Donald Trump can win this
thing. Big money donors and traditional Republican supporters who give $500, $1,000, they're giving it to House, Senate, and Republicans in the House and Senate because they want to keep the majorities there. And so the smart money, meaning the people who may not have a ton, but significantly, consistently contribute, are going to those races.
Right. The race right now is at the ABC Washington Post poll had it back up to a 5-point lead for Hillary. That's before the weekend it was. Between her, fumbling, and stumbling into the van, and the basket of deplorables. My guess is at the end of this week, she's going to be in tough shape polling-wise, don't you think?
I think it'll probably narrow a bit more. Again, we don't need to, the horse race stuff is irrelevant. Whatever the polls are now versus later in the week will have absolutely no impact on the campaign. What happens afterwards will. So the trend matters, but not these little events. There were 52 different events that could have changed the game in 2012, and none of them did. And so my guess is these will be similar to that.
Really? Yeah. Even with this, this undecided vote, which seems to be fertile out there?
Yeah. A lot of people think campaigns matter. They do, but only at the margins. And it's those margins that matter, and those margins are determined by the totality of things, not single events.
Tim Kaine is trying to hold the fort down. He was speaking about Hillary's schedule yesterday.
She's going to try to balance this issue of I got to be out there making my case, I got a work ethic and a campaign, but my doctor is telling me what to do to make sure I'm in good shape, and I know she's getting ready for the debate on the 26th. So there's a lot that's she's juggling, but I'm sure that, that she'll balance those things.
Now, I don't want to feed into this, oh my gosh, she's sicker than everybody thinks she is thing. If she is, by some small chance, what's the timetable? Is he the guy, or do they throw Joe Biden in the mix and explain to everybody how the Democrats make that call?
The Democratic rules say that if somebody cannot run as president in the middle of the campaign after the nomination, what happens is there's a committee meeting. There are designated members of the Democratic National Committee. The meeting is convened. They determine who's going to replace them. Odds are it's going to be the vice presidential nominee because, after all, that's why they were elected, to step in if the president has a problem. Why wouldn't they pick Tim Kaine? Joe Biden is clearly somebody who could, probably win this election pretty easily. So maybe he would be considered as well. But there are.
You say Biden could win the election easily?
Oh, Biden would. My guess is it would be an electoral landslide along, the Reagan '84 landslide, that Joe Biden could probably win.
Well, given that, do you think there's some pressure inside for Hillary to kind of cough it up?
No, I don't think so. I think I think she's got to be a lot more honest about her health and more transparent about her health. She's gonna, because I think she does have to allay fears. If she really is sick, and I doubt she is, but if she were to be really sick, she has to tell them now. But I don't know. No, you win the nomination, it's yours. Just like Trump. No, the Republicans didn't take it away from him. You're not supposed to do that, and so they're not going to do that.
Where's your predictive tendency right now?
You know, again, I would say Clinton is going to win. I think it's a pretty good chance. I just don't see Donald Trump making inroads with the 57% of the people who said under no circumstances will they vote for him.
It's still an electoral college contest here,
right?
And we've got some swing states that are actually tightening in the wrong direction too for each of them.
That's right. But you know, the reality is that the tightening for each washes it out, and September is not late October. Come late October, we'll know whether Georgia and the other Arizona are in play, or whether Pennsylvania and Ohio are. But don't pay too much attention now, because the numbers predict Clinton pretty well. Biden would romp.
Romp. Hey, let's go to the local races. It's primary day, next. Let's real quick run through a couple of local races. Kev, why don't you pop up a couple of things on the screen here? We'll just take a look. Races to watch on a state level. The Majority Leader Don DeSimone and the progressive Marsha Ranglin-Vassell, who was on Newsmakers the other day. That's the Democratic race. And then, of course, the race against Speaker Mattiello, the lead Democrat in the state. It's a playoff. Shauna Lawton and Stephen Frias, both of whom have been here. Let's talk about the top one. Do you think DeSimone is in any kind of trouble? Have you been following this?
I have been paying a little attention. I think DeSimone's in trouble if turnout is high in that district. It's not going to be high statewide, but DeSimone didn't turn many people out in 2012 when he was unopposed, and the progressive Democrats seem to be really energized by the
We're talking about hundreds of votes can win a primary on both sides of the aisle, correct?
Yeah, I think right now if she can turn out 500-600 votes, she'll beat them.
On the Republican side, Frias and Lawton, both of whom have been here and on the radio with me, it could be a total of 500 votes between them coming out. It's too bad in a way, but if you can target a couple 300 people to absolutely commit to you to come out to vote, you can win that primary.
Well, that's the beauty of primaries in a state like Rhode Island. All you have to do is really work hard and mobilize people, and if you can get those people out, you can upset people who are really powerful in this state.
You think either one of those two has a chance to beat the Speaker in the general election?
I think Frias does. All the money is on Frias from what I hear, and they're hoping he wins. And if he wins, I think Mattiello has a weakness. He's got a lot of stuff at his doorstep, even if he's not directly involved.
Mattiello campaign is pretty confident about where they stand right now. I don't know. And as far as the well, they always tell you that. They're always confident. The congressional races, we've got nothing going on. I mean, Chris Young, he's a broken record, and Stephen Archer, never heard of him. Never heard of them.
Yeah.
It's a complete non-issue, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a non-issue. And, Langevin is a little less liberal than Cicilline, but he's solid as long as he wants to be there.
All right. So hold on. Nothing in the polls this week will matter to what? The buoyancy of the race nationally come late October.
That's right.
But the debates will be
Debates are really important this year.
Must-see TV?
Yep.
September 26th, the first one. Thank you, Professor. We'll be right back with a final word. Stay with us.